The Montana wind howled through the pine trees like a wounded animal, carrying with it the promise of another brutal storm. Snow had already begun to fall in thick, heavy flakes, blanketing the desolate landscape in a shroud of white that seemed to muffle even the distant cry of wolves echoing from the deep woods. The world was turning savage again, as it always did when winter tightened its grip on the frontier. Clara Whitmore stood at the frost-covered window of her cabin, her breath fogging the glass as she watched the storm gather strength. At 26, she was too young to be a widow. Yet here she was, 6 months into a grief that felt as raw as the day Sheriff Morrison had ridden up to tell her about Tom. Her husband had been killed in a robbery gone wrong. They said, just another casualty of the lawless territories, another good man buried in the frozen ground before his time. The cabin creaked under the weight of snow on its roof, and Clara pulled her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders. She'd built this life with Tom, every log carefully placed, every board lovingly fitted. Now it felt like a tomb, holding nothing but memories and the echoing silence of her solitude. From the direction of town, 15 miles east through the treacherous mountain passes, came no visitors anymore. The good people of Mercy's Bend had made their judgment clear. A young widow living alone on the frontier was unseemly. They whispered, improper. Some of the more superstitious folk claimed she carried bad luck, that her beauty was a curse that had drawn death to her doorstep. The women clutched their husbands closer when she came to trade, and the men looked at her with eyes that held too much interest and not enough respect. Clara had learned to make do without them. She'd taught herself to shoot Tom's Winchester with deadly accuracy, to mend the fence posts when they broke under the weight of snow, to doctor the horses when they took sick. Pride and necessity had become her closest companions, along with the bone-deep weariness that came from fighting the wilderness alone. She was struggling with a broken fence rail near the horse pen when she saw him. At first, she thought it was a trick of the snow, a dark shape huddled against the old elk trail that wound past her property. But as she squinted through the falling white curtain, the shape resolved into the form of a man, slumped against a boulder as if he'd simply run out of strength to go any further. Clara's hand went instinctively to the pistol at her hip. Strangers meant danger out here, especially for a woman alone. But as she drew closer, she could see the man wasn't moving, save for the shallow rise and fall of his chest. His clothes were torn and travel-stained, his face hidden beneath the brim of a battered hat crusted with ice. She should leave him. Every instinct screamed it, but something in the way he'd collapsed, as if he'd fought to the very last step, stirred a reluctant compassion in her chest. Clara had seen too much death already. Despite herself, she found her boots carrying her closer. "Mister?" she called out, keeping the pistol ready. "You alive?" The man stirred, lifting his head with obvious effort. Clara caught a glimpse of a face weathered by sun and wind, stubbled with several days' growth of beard. His eyes, when they focused on her, were the color of winter sky, pale blue and strangely calm despite his circumstances. "Ma'am," he managed, his voice hoarse. "Didn't mean to trouble anyone. Just needed to rest a spell." "Rest?" Clara's laugh was bitter. "You're half frozen. You rest here much longer, and come spring they'll find you preserved like winter meat." He tried to push himself up and failed, grimacing. That's when Clara noticed the dark stain on his coat, half hidden by the way he held his arm against his side. Blood. Old, but not old enough. "You're hurt," she said, stating the obvious. "Had some disagreeable company a few days back," he admitted. "Nothing that won't mend." Clara stood there for a long moment, snow gathering on her shoulders, weighing her options. Christian charity warred with self-preservation. She thought of Tom, of how he would have helped without hesitation, but Tom's kindness had gotten him killed, hadn't it? "Can you walk?" she finally asked. "With help, maybe." Against every shred of common sense, Clara holstered her pistol and moved to his side. Up close, she could smell the trail on him, leather and wood smoke, horse and something metallic that might have been blood. When she slipped her shoulder under his arm to help him stand, she felt the solid weight of him, the kind of dense muscle that came from years of hard living. "Name's Eli Boone," he said through gritted teeth as they started the slow journey to her cabin. "I didn't ask." Clara replied curtly, "No, ma'am, you didn't." They made it to the cabin as full dark was falling. Clara kicked open the door and helped him to the single chair by the fireplace, trying not to think about how Tom used to sit there in the evenings, smoking his pipe and telling her stories about his childhood in Ohio. Eli's eyes swept the small space, taking in the sparse but neat furnishings, the rifle mounted over the mantel, the absence of any masculine touches save for a pair of work gloves still hanging by the door. "You alone here?" he asked. Clara's hand found her pistol again. "That's none of your concern. Meant no offense. Just, this is hard country for anyone alone, especially come winter." She busied herself stoking the fire, adding logs until the flames roared high. In the growing light, she could see him better. The cowboy was perhaps 35, with lines carved deep around his eyes and mouth. His coat, when he struggled out of it with her reluctant help, revealed a shirt stained with blood and trail dirt. But it was what she saw on his exposed arms that made her breath catch. Scars, dozens of them, some old and white, others still pink and raised. "Apache?" she asked despite herself. He nodded. "Among others. Worked as a supply runner for an expedition company. Got separated from the group in hostile territory. These are reminders of how much the Apache enjoyed my company." Clara fetched water and clean rags, her movements efficient but wary. As she cleaned the wound on his side, a knife cut, mostly healed but torn open again. She was aware of his eyes on her, studying without being improper. "This needs stitching," she said. "I've had worse. It'll hold." "Not if you want to avoid fever." She met his gaze steadily. "I've got whiskey for the pain and a needle that's sharp enough. Your choice. Let me tend it proper, or take your chances with blood poisoning." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. "You always this hospitable to strangers?" "Only the ones who collapse on my land and force me to Christian charity." As she worked, stitching the wound with steady hands while he gripped the chair arms and breathed through the pain, neither of them spoke. The storm outside intensified, wind rattling the windows and snow piling against the walls. When she finished, Eli's face was pale, but his jaw set with determination. "I'm obliged. Mrs. Whitmore," she said shortly. "Clara Whitmore. I'll be moving on come morning. Mrs. Whitmore. Just need to wait out the worst of this storm." Clara looked toward the window, where snow was now falling so thick she couldn't see the horse pen just yards away. "That storm's not breaking for days. Mr. Boone, maybe longer." "Then I'll make camp in your barn. You've done enough. You'll freeze to death in that barn." The words came out sharper than she intended. "Tom built that shelter for horses, not men." At the mention of Tom's name, something shifted in Eli's expression. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a grief he knew too well. "Your husband?" he asked quietly. "Was." Clara turned away, busying herself with putting away the medical supplies. "You can sleep by the fire tonight. Come morning, if the storm breaks, you'll move on. If not—" She shrugged. "We'll figure that when it comes." As if in response to her words, a wolf's howl rose from the forest, long and mournful. It was answered by another, then another, until the night filled with their wild chorus. Clara's hands stilled on the supplies, her whole body going tense. "They're just hunting," Eli said, noticing her reaction. "Probably found an elk herd moving to lower ground." But Clara wasn't listening. She moved quickly through the cabin, checking the locks on the door, the shutters on the windows. Her movements were practiced but urgent, speaking of a fear that went deeper than simple caution. "Mrs. Whitmore." Eli struggled to his feet, concerned. "Stay by the fire," she said, her voice tight. "And if you hear them coming closer, just don't go outside, no matter what you hear." She retreated to the small bedroom, closing the door firmly between them. Eli heard the scrape of a chair being wedged under the handle, the click of a gun being checked and loaded. He settled back by the fire, ignoring the pain in his side, and listened to the wolves sing their ancient songs to the storm. But it wasn't the wolves that concerned him now. It was the terror he'd seen in Clara Whitmore's eyes, a fear that spoke of memories darker than any winter night. Outside, the storm raged on, sealing them both inside the small cabin with their ghosts and secrets. And somewhere in the darkness between the trees, eyes that might have been wolf or might have been something worse watched the small square of light that leaked around the shuttered windows, waiting for the fire to die. The morning light filtered through the frost-etched windows, revealing a world transformed by the storm. Snow had drifted against the cabin walls, in some places reaching nearly to the eaves. Eli woke to find Clara already up, tending to the fire with practiced efficiency. She'd changed into a fresh dress, her hair pinned back severely, and she moved about the cabin as if he wasn't there at all. "Coffee's on," she said without looking at him. "There's cornbread from yesterday if you're hungry." Eli tested his side carefully as he sat up. The stitches held, though the movement sent sharp reminders of the knife wound through his ribs. "Much obliged." He watched her work, noting the economy of her movements, the way she kept herself always angled so she could see both him and the door. This was a woman who'd learned to live with wariness as a constant companion. "That's quite a storm," he observed, nodding toward the window. "Looks like it's set in for a spell." Clara's jaw tightened slightly. "It happens. These mountain storms can last days, sometimes longer. Then I suppose I'd best earn my keep while I'm here." Eli stood carefully, testing his balance. "I noticed your wood pile's running low. I can split some logs. Fix that loose board on your porch. You're injured. I've worked through worse. Besides," he gestured to the window, "doesn't look like I'm going anywhere soon. Might as well be useful." Clara studied him for a long moment, something warring in her expression. Finally, she nodded. "There's an axe in the lean-to, but if that wound opens up again, you're on your own stitching it." Despite her sharp words, when Eli returned from his first load of split wood, he found a pair of Tom's old work gloves laid out on the porch rail. He didn't comment, just pulled them on and went back to work. By midday, he'd repaired the loose board, reinforced the door to the chicken coop, and split enough wood to last a week. Clara watched from the window as he worked, telling herself she was just making sure he didn't steal anything or collapse in the snow. But there was something mesmerizing about the steady rhythm of his movements, the way he seemed to know exactly how to coax the wood to split along its grain, how to shore up a sagging beam without having to tear down the whole structure. When he came in for the noon meal, she had hot stew waiting and fresh bread. They ate in silence at first, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the wind moaning around the corners of the cabin. "You know your way around a homestead." Clara finally said, "Grew up on one, back in Missouri. Before—" Eli paused, then shrugged. "Before I took to wandering. Most men who wander end up dead or worse. Most do," he agreed quietly. "I've been luckier than some." Clara thought of the scars she'd seen, the way he moved like a man always ready for violence, and wondered what he considered lucky. That evening, as she prepared supper, Eli pulled out a small knife and a piece of wood from his pack. He began carving with slow, deliberate strokes, and Clara found herself stealing glances at his work. "What are you making?" "Not sure yet. Sometimes the wood tells you what it wants to be." He held up the piece, studying it in the firelight. "This one might be a bird, or maybe a horse. We'll see." It was such a simple, domestic scene that it made Clara's chest tight with unexpected emotion. How many evenings had she spent like this with Tom? Him working on some project while she cooked, comfortable in each other's silence. "Tell me about the Apache," she heard herself say. Eli's hands stilled on the wood. "Not much to tell. I was young and foolish. Thought I knew everything about surviving in the wilderness. The Apache taught me different." "How long were you with them?" 6 weeks. Felt like 6 years. He resumed carving, his voice matter of fact. They weren't cruel, exactly, just had their own ideas about what to do with a white man who'd wandered into their sacred grounds. I was meant to die, but slow, as a message to others. The scars. Each one was a lesson. About their land, their ways, their losses. Clara shivered despite the warmth of the fire. How did you escape? Didn't they let me go? At her surprised look, he continued. Their war chief, man named Broken Arrow, decided I'd learned enough. Said the scars would speak louder than my death. He was right. Every man who sees them knows to respect Apache territory. But you survived. You're still out here. Different kind of surviving now. I know my limits. Know which territories to avoid. Which signs to heed. He looked up at her. Sometimes the best courage is knowing when to be afraid. That night, as she prepared for bed, Clara found herself pausing at her bedroom door. Through the gap, she could see Eli settling down by the fire, his movements careful but uncomplaining despite his injury. She'd given him blankets and a pillow, and he'd fashioned a decent bedroll near the hearth. "Mr. Boone," she called softly. He looked up. "Ma'am? The wolves, if they come close tonight, I'll keep the fire high," he said, understanding. "They won't come near." Clara nodded and retreated to her room, but this time she didn't wedge the chair under the handle. She lay in bed listening to the storm, to the occasional pop of fresh wood on the fire, to the quiet movements as Eli tended the flames through the night. The storm raged for 3 more days. Each morning, Clara would find Eli already awake, coffee made, fire built up. He took on chores without being asked, mending harnesses, fixing a broken shelf, even helping her with the more delicate task of tending the chickens. He had a way with the birds, gentle despite his scarred hands. That made them settle calmly where they usually fussed and pecked at Clara. In the evenings, they began to talk more freely. Eli told her about his years working for the expedition company, the characters he'd met, the territories he'd crossed. He had a gift for storytelling, painting pictures with words of vast deserts and towering mountains, of frontier towns barely clinging to civilization, and native tribes struggling to hold on to their ancient ways. Clara found herself sharing too, carefully at first, then with growing ease. She told him about meeting Tom at a church social in Ohio, how he'd courted her with wildflowers and promises of adventure in the West, how they'd saved every penny to buy the claim out here, built the cabin board by board, planned for the children that never came. He was a good man, she said one night, staring into the fire. Too good, maybe trusted everyone, saw the best in people even when there was no best to see. That what got him killed? Eli asked gently. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. There was a dispute over water rights. Tom thought he could talk it out, make everyone see reason. He rode out to meet them peacefully. Her voice turned bitter. They shot him before he could even speak, left him to die slow in the sun. By the time someone found him and brought him home, she broke off, unable to finish. Eli didn't offer empty platitudes, didn't try to touch her or comfort her. He just sat quietly, his presence somehow steadying without being intrusive. The men who did it? He asked after a while. Disappeared. Sheriff said they probably headed to Mexico. Said there was nothing to be done. Something flickered in Eli's eyes. A hardness that reminded Clara this was not a man unfamiliar with violence. But he only nodded and returned to his carving. The next morning brought a brief break in the storm. The sun emerged weakly through the clouds, making the snow-covered landscape sparkle like scattered diamonds. Clara announced she needed to check on the horses in the stable, and Eli insisted on accompanying her despite her protests about his injury. They waded through the deep snow, Clara leading the way along a path she'd walked 1,000 times. The horses whickered welcomingly, and she spent time with each one, checking them over, ensuring they had adequate feed and water. You love them, Eli observed, watching her gentle a nervous mare. They're all I have left of. She caught herself. They're good animals, loyal, honest, unlike people, she agreed. As they started back to the cabin, Clara's foot caught on something hidden beneath the snow. She stumbled, and Eli caught her arm, steadying her. For a moment, they stood close, his hand on her elbow, her hand braced against his chest. Clara could feel the heat of him through his coat, could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes, the way his breath clouded in the cold air. Something shifted between them, a recognition of possibility, of dangerous temptation. Clara jerked away as if burned. "I can walk fine on my own," she said harshly. Eli let his hand drop. "I know you can." They completed the walk in tense silence. That night, Clara retreated to her room early, and the chair went back under the door handle. But she lay awake long into the night, listening to the sounds of Eli moving about quietly, tending the fire, existing in her space with a consideration that somehow made his presence both more bearable and more disturbing. Just before dawn, the wolves came. Their howls rose like a chorus of the damned, closer than they'd been any night previous. Clara shot upright in bed, her heart hammering. She heard Eli moving in the main room, the scrape of the rifle being taken down from above the mantel. She emerged from her bedroom to find him standing by the window, peering out through a gap in the shutters. "How many?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "6, maybe 7. They're circling the chicken coop." Clara moved beside him, close enough to see out but careful not to touch. In the pre-dawn darkness, she could make out shapes moving through the snow, shadows against shadows, eyes that caught and reflected what little light there was. "They're hungry," Eli said. "Storm's driven the game to ground. They're desperate enough to risk coming close to humans." One of the wolves, larger than the rest, paused and looked directly at the cabin, even through the shuttered window. Clara could feel the weight of its gaze, ancient and knowing. She shuddered, stepping back involuntarily. Eli noticed her reaction. "They're just animals, Mrs. Whitmore, dangerous ones, but animals all the same." But Clara wasn't seeing wolves. She was seeing other predators, human ones, circling another homestead on another night. She pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting down the bile that rose in her throat. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Eli's voice was concerned now. "Clara." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something about it broke through her panic. She focused on his face, on the steady calm in his eyes. I need to sit down." He guided her to a chair, then knelt beside her, careful not to crowd her. "What is it? What aren't you telling me?" Clara looked at him, this stranger who'd carved out a place in her home with his quiet competence and undemanding presence. The words came haltingly. "The night Tom died, they came here after, the men who killed him, they wanted me to sign over the water rights. Said a woman alone had no business holding property. When I refused..." She couldn't finish, but she didn't need to. Eli's face had gone hard as granite, his scarred hands clenching into fists. "Did they..." "No!" Clara's voice was fierce. "I barricaded myself in this room with Tom's rifle. They circled the house all night, calling out things, terrible things, like wolves, human wolves. When dawn came, they left, but they said they'd be back, said I couldn't stay barricaded forever. That's why you're afraid of the wolves, not the animals themselves, but what they remind you of." Clara nodded, ashamed of her weakness but unable to deny it. Eli stood slowly, his movements deliberate. He checked the rifle, then began moving furniture to better barricade the doors and windows. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done from the start, making this place defensible." He looked at her, and there was something in his expression that made her breath catch. "Those men who killed your husband, would you recognize them? Maybe? Why?" "Because men like that don't go to Mexico. They hole up somewhere close, wait for things to quiet down, then come back for what they think is theirs." He finished securing the last window. "And if this storm's kept me here, it's kept everyone else put too, including them." As if in answer to his words, the wolves outside began howling again, a sound that sent chills down Clara's spine. But this time, Eli was there, steady and solid and prepared. "Get some rest," he told her. "I'll keep watch." You're still injured. I've stood watch in worse condition. Go on. Clara retreated to her bedroom but left the door open a crack. She lay in bed, watching the slice of firelight, listening to Eli's quiet movements as he settled in for a long vigil. Outside, the wolves continued their ancient song, but somehow, with him there, they seemed less like harbingers of doom and more like what they were, wild creatures trying to survive a harsh winter, not so different from the humans huddled in the cabin. As exhaustion finally pulled her towards sleep, Clara's last thought was a dangerous one. For the first time in 6 months, she didn't feel alone. The days that followed blurred together in a strange rhythm of domesticity and tension. The storm had finally broken, but fresh snow continued to fall intermittently, making travel treacherous. Eli had taken to sleeping in the main room permanently, his bedroll a fixture by the hearth, Tom's rifle always within reach. Clara found herself depending on him in ways that both comforted and troubled her. He seemed to anticipate needs before she voiced them. Water buckets filled before she noticed they were empty. Kindling split and stacked before the wood box ran low. The chicken coop reinforced against predators without her having to ask. But it was the small things that unsettled her most. The way he'd learned exactly how she liked her coffee, how he'd whistle softly while working. Old trail songs that filled the silence without demanding conversation. The careful distance he maintained, never crossing the invisible boundaries she'd set, yet somehow always there when she needed steadiness. One morning, Clara woke to find him outside, setting snares along the tree line. She wrapped herself in her heavy coat and joined him, breath misting in the frigid air. "Rabbit tracks," he explained, showing her the delicate prints in the snow. "Fresh. If we can catch a few, it'll stretch your stores. You know I can't pay you for all this work," Clara said abruptly. Eli straightened, meeting her gaze. "I'm not looking for pay." "Then what are you looking for?" He was quiet for a moment, adjusting the snare with practiced hands. "Maybe just a reason to stop moving for a while. Gets tiresome. Always being on the trail. Sometimes a man just wants to be useful to someone." The honesty in his voice made Clara's chest tight. She turned away, ostensibly checking his snare placement, but really trying to compose herself. "These are good," she said finally. "Tom tried to teach me, but I never had the patience for it. It's not about patience. It's about understanding what the animal wants, where it feels safe. Everything alive seeks comfort, even when it leads them into danger." The words hung between them, layered with meaning neither acknowledged. That afternoon, the promised mail carrier fought through the drifts to deliver a month's worth of correspondence. Clara recognized the banker's seal on one envelope, and her heart sank. She opened it with trembling fingers while Eli tactfully busied himself with checking the horses. "Foreclosure notice," she said when he returned, her voice hollow. "I'm 3 months behind on the loan. With Tom gone, the bank doesn't believe I can make the payments." Eli read the notice over her shoulder, his presence solid and warm. "How much?" $200 by month's end, or they start proceedings." Clara laughed bitterly. "Might as well be 2,000. Tom had a contract to supply horses to the army post, but they won't deal with a woman. There's got to be." "There's nothing." Clara crumpled the paper in her fist. "Maybe it's for the best. Maybe everyone's right. Maybe a woman alone has no business trying to hold on to a place like this." "You're not alone." The words slipped out before Eli could stop them. Clara went very still, then slowly turned to face him. They stood there in the small cabin, the weight of possibilities and impossibilities pressing down like the snow on the roof. "You don't even know me," Clara whispered. "I know enough. I know you're the kind of woman who'll stitch up a stranger in a storm, who'll face down wolves rather than abandon what's hers, who keeps fighting even when the whole world tells her to quit." Clara felt tears threaten and blinked them back furiously. Don't make this into something it's not. You're a drifter who needed shelter. I'm a widow who was foolish enough to provide it. When the trail's clear, you'll move on, and I'll figure out what comes next." She pushed past him, grabbing her rifle. "I need to check the fence line. Clara, wait." But she was already out the door, striding through the snow with determined steps. Eli watched her go, recognizing the need for space, for time to process what was happening between them. That evening, a rider appeared on the horizon. Clara saw him first, a dark speck against the white landscape, moving with the purposeful gait of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Her blood ran cold. "Eli," she called quietly. He was beside her in an instant, following her gaze. "You know him. Luke Morrison, the sheriff's son." Clara's voice was tight. "He was sweet on me before I married Tom. Didn't take rejection well." As Luke drew closer, Eli could see he was young, perhaps 25, with the kind of good looks that had probably opened doors all his life. He dismounted with elaborate courtesy, sweeping his hat off in a gesture that might have been charming if not for the calculating look in his eyes. "Clara," he said warmly, as if they were old friends. "I heard about your troubles with the bank. Come to offer my help." "I don't need your help. Luke." His smile faltered slightly as he noticed Eli standing in the doorway. "And who might this be?" "Eli Boone," Eli said, stepping forward. "I've been helping Mrs. Whitmore with repairs." Luke's eyes narrowed, taking in Eli's worn clothes, the comfortable way he stood on Clara's porch. "Repairs. I see. Well, Mr. Boone, I'm sure your services are appreciated, but Mrs. Whitmore and I have private business to discuss." "Any business you have with me can be discussed right here," Clara said firmly. Luke's friendly mask slipped a bit more. "Now, Clara, there's no need to be unfriendly. I've come with a solution to your problems. A proposal, you might say. I'm not interested in any proposal from you. You haven't even heard it yet." Luke's voice hardened. "You marry me, and I'll pay off the bank. Simple as that. You keep your land, gain a husband's protection, and return to respectable society. Everyone wins." Clara's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. "Respectable society? Is that what you call it when you and your friends circle a widow's home at night, making threats?" Luke's face flushed. "I don't know what you're talking about. Tom's death was a tragedy, but dwelling on wild accusations won't bring him back. You need to think about your future. Clara, a woman alone out here. Well, anything could happen. Accidents, wolves, claim jumpers." His eyes flicked to Eli. "Untrustworthy drifters." Eli moved then, subtle but unmistakable, positioning himself slightly between Luke and Clara. "I think Mrs. Whitmore has made her feelings clear." "I wasn't addressing you. Saddle tramp." Luke's hand moved toward his pistol. "This is between me and—" The click of Clara's rifle being cocked cut him off. She had it aimed steady at his chest, her eyes cold as winter steel. "You're right, Luke. This is between you and me, and I'm telling you to get off my land. Don't come back, not with proposals, not with threats, not with your father's badge to hide behind. Tom might have been too trusting, but I'm not." Luke stared at her, then at Eli, his face cycling through anger, disbelief, and something uglier. Finally, he backed toward his horse, hands visible. "You're making a mistake, Clara, a big mistake. When your guard dog here moves on, and he will, you'll be begging for my protection. I'll take my chances with the wolves," Clara said steadily. Luke mounted his horse with considerably less grace than he'd dismounted. "This isn't over. My offer stands until the bank takes your land. Think about it. Think hard." He spurred his horse harder than necessary, sending it lunging through the snow. They watched until he disappeared over the ridge. Then Clara lowered the rifle with shaking hands. "He'll be back," she said quietly. "Him and others, they smell blood in the water now." Eli gently took the rifle from her trembling fingers. "Then we'll be ready." "We?" Clara looked at him, vulnerable and fierce all at once. "You planning to stay? As long as you'll have me. Through the winter, at least. A man could do worse than honest work and a roof over his head." Clara wanted to protest, to maintain the walls she'd built so carefully. But the truth was, she was tired of being alone, tired of jumping at shadows, tired of carrying the weight of the homestead by herself. Through the winter, she agreed softly. That night, as they sat by the fire, Eli returned to his carving while Clara mended a torn shirt. The domestic scene felt both foreign and familiar, dangerous in its simple comfort. "Tell me about before," Clara said suddenly. "Before the Apache, before the wandering. You said you grew up on a homestead." Eli's hands paused on the wood. "Not much to tell. My PA was a hard man, believed in discipline and Bible verses in equal measure. Ma died when I was 12. After that, it was just me, him, and my younger sister, Mary. What happened to them? Cholera took Mary when she was 16. Pa blamed me for not protecting her, for not praying hard enough. Maybe he was right. I left the next day, never looked back." Clara set down her mending. "You can't blame yourself for disease. Can't I? I blame myself for plenty of things. For not being there. For choosing the easy path of running instead of the hard path of staying." He looked at her across the fire. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm still running." "Are you?" He considered the question, studying the piece of wood in his hands. It had taken shape over the past days, becoming recognizable as a bird in flight, wings spread wide. Maybe I finally found a reason to stop." The weight of his words settled over them like a blanket. Clara felt her heart beat faster, felt the dangerous pull of connection she'd sworn to avoid. She thought of Tom, of the promises she'd made at his graveside, of the proprieties that bound her as surely as any rope. Outside, a wolf howled, long and mournful. But for the first time, the sound didn't fill her with dread. Eli was here, steady and solid, carving beauty from rough wood while she worked by his side. It wasn't proper. It wasn't safe. It probably wasn't even wise. But on a frontier where wisdom could get you killed as easily as foolishness, where the proper thing meant dying alone and forgotten, maybe there was something to be said for the dangerous comfort of not facing the wolves alone. "Show me how," Clara said suddenly, gesturing to his carving. "Show me how to find what the wood wants to be." Eli's smile was slow and warm as the fire between them. He shifted closer, producing another piece of wood and a smaller knife from his pack. "First, you have to feel the grain. Understand which way it wants to split." His hands covered hers, guiding the blade, and Clara let herself lean into the instruction, into the warmth of human connection. Outside, winter raged on. Wolves hunted, and men plotted. But inside the small cabin, two damaged souls carved away the excess, slowly revealing what might lie beneath. The next morning dawned clear and bright, one of those rare winter days when the sun seemed to remember its strength. Clara woke to find fresh coffee already made and Eli's bedroll neatly stowed away. Through the window, she could see him working on something in the yard, his breath clouding in the cold air. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside, squinting against the glare of sun on snow. Eli had constructed a makeshift sawhorse and was shaping what looked like fence posts. "You're up early," she observed. "Couldn't sleep. Figured I might as well be useful." He glanced at her, noting the shadows under her eyes. "You didn't sleep well either." It wasn't a question. Clara had indeed spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, her mind churning with worries about the bank, about Luke Morrison, about the man sleeping by her hearth who was becoming dangerously essential to her daily life. "I keep thinking about the payment," she admitted. $200 might as well be the moon. What about selling some horses? In winter, who'd buy them? And even if someone would, I'd get half what they're worth. She pulled her shawl tighter. "Tom always said the horses were our future. Selling them feels like giving up on his dream." Eli set down his tools and faced her fully. "What was your dream, Clara?" The question caught her off guard. "My dream?" "Tom had his plans for the horses. But what did you want? Before you came here, before you were a rancher's wife. What did Clara want?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she said, "I wanted children, a house full of laughter." Sunday dinners with too many people crowded around the table. Simple things. Her voice turned wistful. I used to imagine teaching them to read by the fire, showing them how to bake bread, watching them grow strong and free out here where there's room to breathe. Those are good dreams. They were good dreams. Clara straightened her spine. But dreams don't pay banks. No. Eli agreed. But sometimes holding on to them pays in other ways. They worked side by side that morning, Clara helping him measure and cut the fence posts. The physical labor felt good, purposeful. Around midday, as they paused to eat cold biscuits and drink water, they spotted a small group of riders approaching from the east. Clara tensed immediately, but Eli placed a calming hand on her arm. Too many for trouble in broad daylight. Might be neighbors. Indeed, as the riders drew closer, Clara recognized Martha Sullivan and her 2 sons, along with old Samuel Briggs from the neighboring ranch. Martha, a stout woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and kind eyes, dismounted with surprising agility. "Clara, dear," she called out, "we heard you've had some difficulties." Clara's pride wanted to deny it, but Martha's genuine concern made her throat tight. News travels fast. "Luke Morrison's been flapping his jaw all over town," Samuel said, spitting tobacco juice into the snow. "Saying as how you're being stubborn about accepting help. His kind of help comes with too high a price," Clara said firmly. Martha's eyes traveled to Eli, taking in his presence with shrewd assessment. "And this would be Eli Boone." Clara said, "He's been helping with repairs." "Ma'am." Eli touched his hat brim politely. Martha studied him for a long moment, then nodded as if he'd passed some test. "Mr. Boone, we're having a barn dance Saturday next, over at our place, weather permitting. Of course. Clara, you'll come, both of you." "Martha, I don't think—" "Nonsense. You've been holed up here alone too long. It's not healthy. Besides," Martha's eyes twinkled, "my Albert's been practicing his fiddle all winter. Least you can do is come suffer through it with the rest of us." After they'd gone, leaving behind an invitation Clara couldn't politely refuse and a jar of Martha's famous apple preserves, Eli found Clara sitting on the porch step, looking overwhelmed. "You don't have to go," he said gently. "Make an excuse. Say the horses need tending." "No, Martha's right. I have been hiding." Clara picked at a splinter on the step. "It's just going to a dance with you. People will talk. People are already talking. This would make it worse. They'd say I'm a loose woman, that I didn't mourn Tom properly, that I took up with the first drifter who came along." Eli sat down beside her, careful to leave space between them. "What do you say?" Clara was quiet, watching the sun glint off the snow. "I say I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of caring what narrow-minded people think. Tired of—" She stopped herself. "Tired of being alone." Eli finished softly. She looked at him then. Really looked at him. In the bright sunlight. She could see a line she hadn't noticed before, the way his eyes crinkled when he almost smiled. The patient steadiness that ran through him like bedrock. "Yes," she whispered. "Tired of being alone." Something shifted in that moment. Acknowledgement of what had been building between them. Eli's hand moved slightly on the step, not quite reaching for hers, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of it. A sharp crack echoed across the valley, shattering the moment. Eli was on his feet instantly, pulling Clara behind him as he scanned the tree line. "Hunters," he said after a moment, but his hand remained on his pistol. "Maybe stay close to the cabin." They spent the rest of the day on edge, starting at every sound. As darkness fell, Eli did another circuit of the property, checking his snares and looking for signs of watchers. He found boot prints near the eastern ridge, too deliberate to be casual hunters. That night, Clara made a decision. Instead of retreating to her bedroom after supper, she settled into the other chair by the fire, taking up her mending. Eli looked at her questioningly but said nothing. Returning to his carving, they sat in companionable silence for a while before Clara spoke. Tell me about the places you've been, the beautiful ones. So Eli told her about sunrise over the painted deserts of Arizona, about hidden valleys in Colorado where wildflowers grew so thick you could barely see the ground, about nights so clear in the high country that the stars seemed close enough to touch. His voice painted pictures that made Clara's small world seem both precious and confining. Do you miss it, the wandering? Sometimes, when the wind blows a certain way, or I catch the scent of sage on the breeze. He looked at her across the flickering firelight. But missing something doesn't mean you need to chase it. Sometimes what you need is right where you are. Clara felt her cheeks warm and focused intently on her stitching. I used to want to travel, see the ocean, visit cities where buildings stretch taller than trees. Tom promised we'd go someday. After the ranch was established, it's not too late, isn't it? Clara's laugh was bitter. I can barely hold on to this piece of land. The world beyond it might as well be the moon. Eli set down his carving and leaned forward. Clara, look at me. Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to his. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You've survived loss that would break most folks. Kept this place running alone. Faced down men who thought they could intimidate you. You could do anything you set your mind to. Then why do I feel so afraid all the time? Because you're smart. Fear keeps us alive out here. But there's a difference between the fear that protects and the fear that imprisons. Clara found herself leaning toward him, drawn by the warmth in his voice, the steady strength of his presence. Which kind is this? She whispered, meaning the fear of the growing connection between them. Only you can answer that. They were close now. Close enough that Clara could see the gold flecks in his blue eyes, could smell the wood smoke and leather scent of him. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild thing seeking escape. The sound of wolves howling broke the spell. Clara jerked back, hand going to her throat. But this time, Eli noticed. She didn't flee to her room. She stayed in her chair, fingers white-knuckled on her mending. They're heading north, Eli said calmly. Following the elk herds, not interested in us tonight. Clara nodded, forcing her breathing to steady. I know. The sound still... I know. And he did know. She realized. This man who'd survived Apache captivity, who carried scars inside and out, understood about sounds that triggered memories, about fears that lived in your bones. They sat together as the wolves' song faded into distance, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Clara stood, gathering her mending. The barn dance, she said abruptly. I'll need to fix my good dress. Haven't worn it since... She trailed off. We don't have to go. No, we'll go. She met his eyes, chin lifted in determination. Let them talk. I'm tired of living like I'm the one who died. She moved toward her room, then paused at the doorway. Eli? Yeah? Thank you for staying, for... She struggled for words. Just thank you. He nodded, understanding what she couldn't say. After her door closed, he sat staring into the fire for a long time, absently turning the carved bird over in his hands. It was finished now, wings spread wide in eternal flight, ready to soar. But sometimes, he thought, even birds needed to land, to find a branch that felt like home, no matter how temporary. He set the carving on the mantel, where the firelight made the wooden wings seem to flutter with life, and settled in for another night of watching over Clara Whitmore's troubled sleep. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent, covering the boot prints by the eastern ridge, hiding evidence of watchers in the woods. But Eli had learned long ago that the most dangerous predators were the ones who knew how to wait, how to use patience as a weapon. He checked the rifle one more time and pulled his chair closer to the door. Some storms, he knew, had nothing to do with weather. The day of the barn dance arrived with clear skies and a bitter wind that cut through even the heaviest coats. Clara stood before her small mirror, fingers trembling as she fastened the buttons of her good dress, a deep blue wool that Tom had said brought out her eyes. She hadn't worn it since his funeral. You look fine, she told her reflection, trying to quiet the butterflies in her stomach. It wasn't the dress or the dance that unsettled her. It was the thought of appearing in public with Eli, of making a statement she wasn't sure she was ready to make. A soft knock at her door made her jump. "Clara, the horses are hitched." She emerged to find Eli transformed. He'd trimmed his beard, slicked back his hair, and somehow produced a clean shirt she'd never seen before. He looked respectable, handsome, even. The thought made her cheeks warm. "You clean up well, Mr. Boone," she managed. His eyes traveled over her. Appreciation clear but respectful. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Whitmore." The ride to the Sullivan Ranch was quiet, both of them lost in thought. As they crested the final hill and saw the barn lit up with lanterns, wagons and horses already gathering, Clara's courage almost failed her. "We can still turn back," Eli said, reading her tension. "No." Clara straightened her spine. "I won't give them the satisfaction of thinking they've driven me into hiding." The barn was warm and crowded, filled with neighbors Clara hadn't seen in months. Conversation stuttered to a halt as they entered, all eyes turning to assess the widow Whitmore and her companion. Then Martha Sullivan bustled forward, breaking the tension. "Clara, don't you look lovely? And Mr. Boone, so glad you could come. Albert's just about to start the music." Slowly, conversations resumed, though Clara could feel the weight of speculative glances. She recognized most faces, ranchers and their wives, townsfolk, a few cowboys from the larger spreads. And there, holding court near the punch bowl, stood Luke Morrison with his father, the sheriff. "Steady," Eli murmured, his hand briefly touching her elbow. They found a spot along the wall as Albert Sullivan struck up his fiddle, joined by Samuel Briggs on guitar. The music was lively, if not entirely on key, and soon couples were moving onto the makeshift dance floor. Clara watched, remembering other dances, Tom's arms around her, his laughter in her ear as they stumbled through the steps. The memory should have hurt, but instead it felt distant, like looking at a daguerreotype of someone else's life. "Dance with me." She looked up to find Eli extending his hand, his expression serious. "People will talk," she warned. "They're already talking. Might as well give them something worth discussing." Clara hesitated for a heartbeat, then placed her hand in his. His fingers were warm, calloused, steady. He led her onto the floor with surprising grace, one hand settling properly at her waist, the other holding hers at the correct distance. "You dance," she said, startled. "My mother insisted. Said a man who couldn't dance would never win a good woman's heart." A shadow crossed his face. "Course, that was before she died." Clara finished softly. They moved together, finding their rhythm. Eli danced like he did everything else, with quiet competence and attention to detail. Clara felt herself relaxing, letting the music carry her, letting him lead. "People are staring," she murmured. "Let them. You have every right to be here, to dance, to live your life, even with a stranger, a drifter who appeared from nowhere." Eli's hand tightened slightly on her waist. "I'm not a stranger anymore, am I?" The question hung between them as they turned with the music. No, Clara realized. Somewhere between that first night and now, Eli had stopped being a stranger. She knew how he took his coffee, knew the sound of his breathing when he slept by the fire, knew the careful way he moved when his old wounds pained him. "No," she whispered. "You're not." The dance ended, but for a moment they stayed frozen, hands still clasped. Then reality intruded in the form of Luke Morrison's mocking applause. Well, the widow Whitmore has found herself a new protector. How convenient." Eli stepped slightly in front of Clara. "Morrison. That's Deputy Morrison to you. Drifter." Luke's eyes were bright with drink and malice. "Tell me, Clara, does he know about Tom's debts? About how desperate you really are?" "That's enough, Luke," Sheriff Morrison warned, but his heart wasn't in it. "I'm just looking out for her. Pa, making sure she's not taken advantage of by some saddle tramp with a smooth line." Luke's smile was ugly. "After all, we wouldn't want her to end up like poor Tom. Trusting the wrong people can be fatal." The barn went quiet. Clara felt Eli tense beside her, coiled like a spring. "Are you threatening Mrs. Whitmore?" Eli's voice was dangerously soft. "Threatening? No, just observing. Accidents happen out here, especially to folks who don't know their place." "Luke!" Martha Sullivan's voice cracked like a whip. "That's quite enough. This is a social gathering, not a saloon. If you can't behave properly, you can leave." Luke's face flushed, but he backed down under Martha's stern gaze. "Just trying to help," he muttered, retreating to his corner. The music resumed, but the festive mood was strained. Clara felt the weight of every glance, heard the whispers that followed in their wake. When she couldn't stand it anymore, she slipped out the barn's side door into the cold night air. She'd barely taken 3 breaths before Eli joined her, bringing her shawl. "You'll freeze," he said, wrapping it around her shoulders. "I hate them," Clara said fiercely, surprising herself with the vehemence. "Their judgment, their whispers, their small-minded assumptions. They're afraid," Eli said quietly. "You're a woman who won't follow their rules, won't marry who they think you should, won't give up when they expect you to. That frightens people." "Does it frighten you?" "No, it amazes me." Clara turned to face him, searching his face in the moonlight. "Why are you really here, Eli? You could have moved on when the storm broke, could have found work at any ranch between here and California. Why stay?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "First night, when you stitched me up, you could have turned me away. Most would have, but you didn't. You showed kindness to someone who'd given you no reason to trust." He paused. "And when I saw the fear in your eyes when those wolves howled, I recognized it. The kind of fear that comes from human cruelty, not animal nature. So you stayed out of pity?" "No." He stepped closer, and Clara's breath caught. "I stayed because something in you called to something in me. Like recognizes, like, maybe, 2 people who've been broken but refuse to stay that way." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I am broken. Eli, Tom's death broke something in me. Those men coming to the house after, circling like vultures. It broke me more. I don't know if I can be put back together. Maybe you're not meant to be put back the way you were." His hand came up, hovering near her cheek, but not quite touching. "Maybe you're meant to become something new, stronger, different." A burst of laughter from the barn made them both turn. Through the windows, they could see couples dancing, children playing, normal life continuing. "I want that," Clara whispered. "I want to be able to laugh again, to dance without feeling guilty, to wake up without dread sitting on my chest like a stone." "Then take it," Eli urged. "Stop waiting for permission from people who don't matter. Take what you want." "What if what I want is impossible? What if it's wrong?" "According to who?" Clara looked up at him. This man who'd carved out a place in her life with patient persistence. In the moonlight, the scars on his neck were silver threads, proof of survival rather than defeat. She thought of all the reasons she should step back, go inside, maintain the careful boundaries that protected her reputation. Instead, she rose up on her toes and kissed him. It was awkward at first, Clara out of practice and uncertain, but Eli's hand came up to cup her cheek, gentle and sure, and suddenly it felt as natural as breathing. He tasted of apple cider and possibility, and Clara felt something inside her chest crack open, not breaking, but thawing, like ice giving way to spring. When they parted, both breathing unsteadily, Clara touched her fingers to her lips in wonder. "I shouldn't have," she began. "Yes, you should have." Eli's thumb traced her cheekbone. "Question is, what happens now?" Before Clara could answer, the barn door burst open. Young Timothy Sullivan ran out, eyes wide with excitement. "Mrs. Whitmore! Mr. Boone! Pa says to come quick. There's been trouble at the Hendricks place. Raiders hit them hard." The spell shattered. They rushed back inside to find the barn in uproar. John Hendricks stood in the center, blood on his shirt, telling his story to the sheriff. Came at dusk. 6, maybe 7 men, took the horses, burned the feed barn. When I tried to stop them, he gestured to his bloodied arm, said this was just the beginning, said folks better learn to be more accommodating. Clara's blood ran cold. She caught Eli's eye, saw her own thoughts reflected there. This was no random raid. Did you recognize any of them? Sheriff Morrison asked, though his tone suggested he didn't really want an answer. Hard to say. They wore masks, but one of them... Hendricks hesitated, glancing at Luke. One of them knew exactly where we kept the cash box, like he'd been told. The implications hung heavy in the air. Clara felt Eli's hand at her back, steady and protective. We should go, he murmured. If they're escalating... She nodded. They made their excuses to Martha, who pressed Clara's hand with understanding. As they collected their coats, Luke Morrison appeared at Clara's elbow. Scary times, he said conversationally. A woman alone, isolated ranch. Why, anything could happen. Still time to reconsider my offer. Clara. Go to hell, Clara said clearly, loudly enough that several people turned to stare. Luke's face darkened. You'll regret that. The only thing I regret, Clara said, is not seeing through you sooner. You're not half the man Tom was, not a quarter the man... She bit off the comparison, but Luke's eyes narrowed as he looked between her and Eli. I see, that's how it is. His smile was vicious. Enjoy your protector while you can. Clara, drifters have a way of drifting. On the ride home, Clara huddled close to Eli on the wagon seat. No longer caring about propriety, the night seemed full of threats, every shadow potentially hiding violence. They'll come for us next, she said quietly. Probably. I won't run. I won't let them drive me off Tom's land. Our land, Eli corrected gently. When she looked at him in surprise, he clarified, You said us. They'll come for us. That makes it our fight, our land to defend. Clara felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. Yes, she said firmly. Ours. As they crested the hill above her ranch, both of them tensed. A light flickered in the cabin window, a light they hadn't left burning. Eli pulled the horses up short, reaching for his rifle. Stay here. Like hell, Clara said, checking her pistol. They approached carefully, using the barn for cover. Through the window, Clara could see a figure moving inside, going through her things. On 3, Eli whispered. But before he could count, the cabin door opened. A man stepped out onto the porch, silhouetted against the light from inside. Clara's breath caught as she recognized the build, the way he held himself. Hello, Clara, the man called out. Been a while. Thought it was time I came back for what's mine. It was Jake Thornton, the man who'd killed Tom, the leader of the group who'd circled her house that terrible night. He wasn't in Mexico after all. He was here, on her porch, smiling like he'd come calling for Sunday dinner. Oh, he added casually, I brought some friends. Hope you don't mind. More figures emerged from the shadows. 5 men, all armed, all watching with predatory patience. Clara's hand found Eli's in the darkness, gripping tight. The wolves had finally come to her door, but this time, she wouldn't be barricading herself inside. This time, she had teeth of her own. Stay behind the wagon, Eli whispered, his voice steady despite the danger. When I give the signal, I'm not hiding, Clara interrupted, her jaw set with determination. Not this time. Jake Thornton lounged against the porch rail like he owned the place, his confidence nauseating. Now, no need for whispering. Come on out, Clara. Let's discuss this like civilized folks. There's nothing civilized about you, Clara called back, her voice carrying clear across the yard. Jake's laugh was ugly. Tom thought different. Thought he could reason with me, work out our little dispute over water rights all peaceful-like. Look how that turned out for him. Rage, white-hot and pure, flooded through Clara. Her hand tightened on her pistol until her knuckles ached. Easy, Eli murmured. He's trying to provoke you, make you careless. Oh, and you brought company, Jake continued, his tone mocking. The drifter everyone's talking about. Tell me, Clara, Does he know what happened after Tom died? Does he know how you cowered in that bedroom while real men tried to show you sense? One of Jake's men snickered. Maybe she needs another lesson in respect. Maybe you need a lesson in leaving before a lead starts flying, Eli said, stepping partially into view, rifle ready but not yet aimed. Jake straightened, his casual demeanor shifting to something more dangerous. You'd be Boone. Heard about you in town, the hero playing house with the grieving widow. He spat tobacco juice onto Clara's clean porch. Here's some free advice. Friend, ride on. This ain't your fight. Made it mine when I stayed. Eli replied evenly. Your funeral? Jake gestured to his men. Though I'll admit, I'm curious. What's a man like you, Apache-scarred, trail-hardened, doing playing nursemaid to a woman who can't accept when she's beaten? Clara stepped out before Eli could stop her, pistol raised and steady. I'm not beaten, Jake. Not by you, not by Luke Morrison, not by anyone who thinks a woman alone is easy prey. Jake's eyes glittered with malice. Alone? That's the problem right there. Clara, you were alone when I put that bullet in Tom. You were alone when we came calling after, and you'll be alone when I'm done with your new pet here. You're forgetting something, a new voice called out. Everyone turned as riders emerged from the darkness. Martha Sullivan and her sons, Samuel Briggs, the Hendricks brothers, and a half-dozen other neighbors, all armed, all grim-faced. The lady isn't alone, Martha said, her shotgun trained on Jake. Hasn't been for a while now, if you'd been paying attention. Jake's confidence faltered. This ain't your business, Martha. Threatening my neighbors, making folks afraid to sleep safe in their beds, that's everyone's business. Samuel Briggs spat his own stream of tobacco. We tolerated you boys too long, thinking you'd move on. That ends tonight. The odds had shifted dramatically. Jake's men looked nervous now, hands hovering near weapons but not quite committed to a fight they couldn't win. Sheriff Morrison know you're here playing vigilante. Jake tried. Sheriff Morrison's dealing with his own problems. John Hendricks said, seems his son Luke met with an accident on the ride home. Horse threw him. He'll live, but he won't be deputying for a while. Clara felt a savage satisfaction at the news. Jake's face contorted with rage. You think you've won? You think this changes anything? I'll be back. Maybe not tonight. Maybe not tomorrow, but... The shot came from behind Clara. Not from Eli, but from old Samuel, his ancient rifle smoking. The bullet kicked up dirt inches from Jake's boot. That's the only warning you get, Samuel said calmly. Next one goes center mass. You and your boys got exactly 1 minute to get off this property and keep riding. Don't stop at town. Don't stop at the territory line. Just keep going until even the wind don't know your names. For a moment, violence hung in the air like morning mist, ready to explode. Then Jake slowly raised his hands, backing toward his horse. This ain't over, he snarled. Yes, Eli said quietly. It is. Something in his tone must have reached Jake, because the outlaw's bravado finally cracked. He mounted his horse, gesturing sharply to his men. They rode out fast, disappearing into the darkness. Clara stood frozen, pistol still raised, trembling with unused adrenaline. Martha dismounted and approached slowly, gently pushing the weapon down. It's done, honey. They're gone. For now, Clara said, her voice hollow. For good, Martha corrected firmly. We'll see to it. Should have done it sooner. But we all got too comfortable looking the other way. Tom's death woke us up. What happened tonight at the dance made us realize we'd been cowards too long. The neighbors filed into Clara's cabin, and suddenly her isolated home was full of warmth and voices. Someone made coffee. Someone else checked the windows and doors Jake's men had tampered with. Plans were made, watch schedules, signals, promises of mutual aid. Through it all, Clara moved in a daze. This was what she'd dreamed of. A community, people who cared, safety in numbers. But it had taken violence and threats to bring it about. She found herself on the porch, needing air. Eli joined her, standing close but not touching. You all right? I don't know, she admitted. I thought I'd feel different when I faced him. Stronger, maybe, or satisfied, but I just feel empty. That's normal. Vengeance rarely fills the holes loss leaves behind. Clara looked at him. Is that why you didn't shoot? You had a clear shot when he was threatening me. Wasn't my shot to take. Besides, Eli's mouth quirked slightly. Seems your neighbors had their own plans. They stood quietly, listening to the voices inside. The sound of community Clara had been denied for so long. They came because of you, Eli said softly. Your strength, your refusal to give in, it inspired them. They came because you stayed, Clara countered. Seeing someone stand with me made them brave enough to stand too. Maybe it was both. Clara felt tears threaten, not of sadness, but of overwhelming emotion. So much had changed so quickly. The threats that had haunted her for months were gone, scattered like smoke. Her neighbors had rallied to her defense, and this man beside her. What happens now? She asked, echoing his earlier question. Now you rebuild. Without fear, without looking over your shoulder, you make this place what you and Tom dreamed it could be. And you. Eli was quiet for a moment. Spring's coming. Trails will clear. Work will open up elsewhere. Clara's heart sank. Of course. She'd always known he was temporary, a season's shelter from the storm. But hearing him say it, I see, she managed. Clara, no, you're right. You were always clear about moving on. She stopped, unable to finish. You just what? The words came in a rush. I just forgot to protect myself from you. I was so busy building walls against the Jake Thorntons and Luke Morrisons of the world. I didn't notice you slipping past all my defenses. And now? Clara turned to face him fully, letting him see everything in her eyes. The want, the fear, the desperate hope she'd tried so hard to deny. Now I don't know how to let you go. Eli's control finally cracked. He pulled her to him, kissing her with a desperation that matched her own. Clara melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt, holding on like he might disappear if she let go. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Eli rested his forehead against hers. I'm a drifter, Clara. It's all I've known for 15 years. I don't know how to stay in one place. Don't know if I can learn. Then don't, Clara said fiercely. Drift, but drift back to me. Make this your center, the place you return to. I'm not asking you to change who you are, Eli. I'm asking you to let me be part of it. He pulled back to search her face. You'd accept that? Half a life, coming and going? I'd accept whatever you can give, as long as it's honest, as long as it's real. What would people say? Clara laughed, surprising them both. Let them talk. I'm done living my life by other people's rules. The cabin door opened, spilling light and voices into the night. Martha appeared, smiling knowingly. Sorry to interrupt, but we've got plans to make. Clara, the boys are organizing patrols. We'll need to coordinate with your schedule. She paused, looking between them. That is, both your schedules. The assumption that Eli would be staying, be part of the planning, part of the defense, part of the community, hung in the air. Clara held her breath. Yes, ma'am, Eli said quietly. Both our schedules. Martha's smile widened. Good. Now come inside before you freeze. This is your home, after all, both of you. As they followed Martha inside, Clara caught Eli's hand, squeezing gently. He squeezed back, a promise without words. The cabin was crowded, noisy, alive with planning and purpose. Someone had found Tom's old maps, spreading them on the table. Defensive positions were discussed, watch schedules arranged. Clara was consulted on every decision, her knowledge of the land respected and valued. We'll need a signal system, John Hendricks was saying. Something that can be seen from the neighboring spreads. Fire, Eli suggested. Build signal towers on the high points. 1 fire means all's well. 2 means gather. 3 means immediate danger. The men nodded approval, accepting his input without question. Clara watched as Eli was drawn into the planning, his expertise recognized and welcomed. This was what she'd offered him, Not just a place to stay, but a place to belong. Later, much later, after the neighbors had gone with promises to return tomorrow. Clara and Eli sat by the dying fire. The cabin felt different now, still hers, but expanded somehow, large enough to hold 2 lives instead of 1. "I've never had a home," Eli said suddenly. "Not since I left Missouri. Never wanted one. Home meant pain, loss, disappointment. And now," he looked around the cabin, at the rifle returned to its place above the mantel, at the carved bird he'd placed there days ago, at Clara curled in the chair beside him. "Now I'm thinking maybe I was defining it wrong." He met her eyes. "Maybe home isn't a place. Maybe it's a person. Someone who sees all your scars and doesn't flinch. Someone worth coming back to." Clara felt her heart crack wide open, flooding with warmth. "Is that your way of saying you'll stay?" "It's my way of saying I'll try. Can't promise I'll be good at it. Might get restless. Might need to ride out sometimes, just to feel the wind. But I'll always come back, if you'll have me." "I'll have you," Clara said simply. "However you come to me, for however long you can stay." They sealed the promise with a kiss, soft and sure. Outside, snow began to fall again, but inside, the fire burned warm and steady. The wolves didn't howl that night. Perhaps they, too, recognized that something had shifted in the territory. The prey had become the pack, and the lone wolves had found their den. In her bedroom, Clara lay awake for a long time, listening to Eli move quietly around the main room, banking the fire, checking the locks, domestic sounds that spoke of permanence, of protection, of home. For the first time in months, she felt truly safe. Tomorrow would bring challenges. The bank still needed paying, the ranch needed working, and Jake Thornton's threats might not be entirely empty. But tonight, she had warmth and walls and a man who'd chosen to stay despite every instinct telling him to run. Sometimes, she thought as sleep finally claimed her, the greatest courage wasn't in facing down outlaws or standing against the world's judgment. Sometimes it was in opening a door you'd barred, in letting someone pass defenses you'd built for good reason, in choosing to trust when trust had nearly killed you. The wolves might howl again, but now she had her own pack to howl back. The peace lasted 3 days. Clara woke before dawn to the sound of horses approaching fast, too fast for a social call. She reached for the pistol beside her bed, then heard Eli's voice from the main room, calm but alert. "Clara, company coming." She dressed quickly, hands steady despite her racing heart. The community watch system they'd established should have warned them sooner. Unless... "How many?" she asked, emerging from her room. "4 riders, moving like they're running from something?" Eli stood by the window, rifle ready. "Wait, that's Samuel Briggs' boy." Young Pete Briggs thundered into the yard, his horse lathered with sweat. "Mr. Boone, Mrs. Whitmore, you gotta come quick. They got my PA." Clara's blood ran cold as she and Eli rushed outside. Pete was barely 16, trying hard to be a man, but fear making him look like the boy he still was. "Slow down, son," Eli said. "Who has your father?" "Jake Thornton. He never left the territory. Been hiding out at the old Mackenzie place. Pa was checking the signal tower when they grabbed him." Pete's voice cracked. "They sent me with a message. Said to bring you, Mrs. Whitmore. Just you. Or they'll... We know what they'll do," Clara said quietly. "You're not going," Eli stated flatly. Clara looked at him, seeing the fear he was trying to hide. "It's Samuel. He stood for me against Jake. I can't let him die for that." "It's a trap." "Of course it's a trap. But what choice do we have?" Pete pulled out a crumpled paper. "Jake said to give you this." Clara recognized Jake's crude handwriting. "The widow comes alone by noon. We trade, the old man for the woman. Bring your guard dog and they both die." "I'll gather the others," Eli said. "We'll surround the place." "No time," Pete interrupted. "Jake said he's got men watching. Any sign of a rescue party and Pa's dead. He means it. Mr. Boone. You didn't see his eyes." Clara made her decision. "Saddle Duchess for me." "Clara, no!" Eli caught her arm. This is exactly what he wants. You and his power, no witnesses. And Samuel dead is what happens if I don't go. She covered his hand with hers. I'm not the same woman who hid in that bedroom. Eli, I won't be her again. Then I'm coming with you. You read the note. He'll kill Samuel. He'll kill you both anyway. Eli's control cracked. Clara, please. We just found each other. Don't ask me to let you ride into certain death. She reached up, touching his face gently. I'm asking you to trust me, to be ready. Jake thinks I'm still the frightened widow he can intimidate. Let him think that. Understanding dawned in Eli's eyes. You're planning something. Tom taught me to shoot. You taught me to survive. Time to see if I learned anything. She turned to Pete. Tell Jake I'll come. Alone. But I want proof your father's alive first. As Pete rode off, Clara began her preparations. She strapped her pistol to her hip, visible and expected. But she also tucked Tom's skinning knife into her boot, slipped a small derringer into her coat pocket, and pinned her hair up tight so it couldn't be grabbed. Eli watched her transform from rancher's widow to frontier warrior. You know what you're walking into? Yes. Clara checked her weapons one more time. Jake wants to break me, humiliate me. Make an example of what happens to women who don't submit. He won't kill me quick. That's what I'm afraid of. Clara met his eyes. That's what I'm counting on. His need to gloat, to make me suffer. It'll make him careless. And when he is, I'll be there. Eli promised. Hidden, but there. No, stay here. If something happens to me, nothing will happen to you. His voice was fierce. I didn't survive Apache torture and 15 years of drifting to lose you now. I'll give you an hour's head start. Then I'm following. Carefully. Clara knew arguing was useless. Part of her was desperately grateful. The Mackenzie place has a barn loft. Good view of the house. Easy to miss if you're not looking. I'll find it. They stood facing each other. So much unsaid. Then Clara rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring everything she couldn't voice into the contact. Come back to me, he whispered against her lips. Always. The ride to the abandoned Mackenzie homestead felt both eternal and too quick. Clara's mind raced through possibilities, plans, contingencies. The morning sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the snow-covered ground. The Mackenzie place had been deserted for 2 years, ever since fever took the whole family. The buildings stood like skeletons against the white landscape. House, barn, broken corral fences. Perfect for an ambush. Clara saw them before they showed themselves. Movement in the windows. Horses hidden behind the barn. She kept Duchess to a steady walk, hands visible on the reins. Jake emerged from the house, cocky as ever. Behind him, 2 men dragged Samuel Briggs out. The old man was bloodied but alive, hands tied, a gag in his mouth. Clara! Jake called cheerfully. Right on time. I do admire punctuality in a woman. She stopped 20 feet away, staying mounted. Let him go. Jake, you have me. That's what you wanted. Is it? Maybe I've changed my mind. Maybe I want more than just you now. Jake's smile was predatory. Get down from that horse, slowly. Clara dismounted, keeping her movements careful and non-threatening. She saw Jake's eyes track to her visible pistol, dismissed it. He thought he knew all her secrets. Search her, Jake ordered. One of his men approached. Clara submitted to the rough search, letting him take her pistol. He missed the knife in her boot, the derringer in her coat, sloppy, overconfident. Now, Jake said, satisfied. We're going to have a conversation about respect, about what happens when a woman forgets her place. But first, he nodded to his men. Tie her hands. As they bound her wrists in front of her. Another mistake, she noted. Clara kept her eyes on Samuel. The old man was trying to tell her something with his eyes, jerking his head slightly toward the barn. You killed my husband, Clara said, keeping Jake's attention on her. Why? The water rights weren't worth a man's life. Jake laughed. Water rights? You think this was about water? He moved closer, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. This was about teaching lessons, Tom thought he was better than us, thought his pretty wife and his legal deeds made him special, had to show him different. So you shot him. I gave him a chance to be reasonable. He chose to be noble instead. Jake's hand came up, gripping Clara's chin roughly. Now I'm giving you the same chance. Sign over the ranch, nice and legal. Save us all some trouble. I'll sign nothing. The slap came hard and fast. Snapping Clara's head to the side, she tasted blood but didn't cry out. Wrong answer, Jake said. Boys, put the old man back inside. We'll deal with him after I'm done educating Mrs. Whitmore. As they dragged Samuel away, Clara caught more movement near the barn. Not from the loft where Eli might be, but from the side door. Her heart jumped. The neighbors hadn't abandoned them after all. She needed to buy time. You're right, she said, letting defeat color her voice. I can't win. I'll sign. Jake's eyes lit with triumph. See, that wasn't so hard. Just needed the right motivation. He produced a folded paper from his coat. Already drew up. Just need your signature. Clara made a show of reading it, stumbling over the words with her bound hands. The document would give Jake everything. The ranch, the water rights, even the horses. I need something to write with. Jake handed her a pencil, watching greedily as she positioned it awkwardly in her tied hands. Clara bent to sign, using the movement to shift her weight, feeling the knife handle press against her ankle. Then everything happened at once. A rifle shot cracked from the barn, not the loft, but ground level. One of Jake's men spun and fell. Martha Sullivan and her sons burst from the barn's side door, weapons blazing. From the house came answering fire as Samuel, who'd apparently not been as helpless as he seemed, turned on his captors with a hidden gun. Jake roared with rage, reaching for his pistol. Clara didn't hesitate. She dropped low, pulling the knife from her boot in one smooth motion, and drove it up into Jake's thigh. He screamed, staggering back. Clara rolled away as bullets filled the air where she'd been standing. She saw Eli emerge from the barn loft, rifles speaking in measured shots, each one finding its mark. Jake, bleeding and cursing, tried to grab Clara as a shield. She twisted in her bonds, got the derringer from her pocket, and put 2 bullets into his chest at point-blank range. Time seemed to slow as Jake fell, his eyes wide with shock. He tried to speak, blood bubbling from his lips, then collapsed into the churned snow. The gunfire stuttered to a stop. Clara looked around wildly. 2 of Jake's men were down, the others surrendering with hands high. Samuel limped from the house, supported by John Hendricks. Martha lowered her shotgun, face grim but satisfied. Eli was beside Clara in seconds, cutting her bonds, checking her for injuries. His hands shook slightly as he touched the bruise already forming on her cheek. I'm all right, she assured him. It's over. It's really over. You magnificent, foolish woman. He breathed, pulling her against him. When I saw him hit you, I knew you'd come, all of you. Clara looked around at her neighbors, her friends, who'd risked everything for her. How? Martha smiled grimly. Pete came to us first. Bless him. We figured you'd try something noble and stupid, so we got here first. Waited for our moment. Jake won't be missed, Samuel added, spitting blood. Man was a rabid dog. You did the territory a favor, Clara. Clara looked down at Jake's body, waiting to feel something. Guilt, satisfaction, regret. Instead, there was only emptiness and a bone-deep weariness. Let's go home, she said quietly. The ride back was subdued. Jake's surviving men were tied and would be delivered to the sheriff, the federal one, not Morrison, who'd mysteriously decided to retire after his son's accident. The bodies would be buried without ceremony. At Clara's ranch, Martha insisted on tending her bruised face while the men dealt with the horses. Eli hovered nearby, unable to go far from Clara's side. You did what you had to, Martha said gently, applying a cold cloth to Clara's cheek. No shame in surviving. I killed a man, Clara said numbly. Shot him close enough to see his eyes. Tom would have found another way. Tom's kindness got him killed, Martha said bluntly. Your courage saved lives today. Samuel's life. Maybe others Jake would have hurt down the line? After everyone left, promising to return tomorrow to help with neglected chores, Clara sat on the porch despite the cold. Eli joined her, wrapping a blanket around both their shoulders. "I thought I'd lost you today," he said quietly. "When you rode off alone, I felt something I haven't felt since the Apache had me. Pure terror." "I'm sorry. I had to—" "I know, and I'm proud of you. Proud and terrified in equal measure." He pulled her closer. "This is what it'll be like, isn't it? You facing danger, me trying to protect you, both of us too stubborn to back down." "Probably," Clara admitted. "Can you live with that?" Eli was quiet for a moment. "My whole life, I've avoided connections because I couldn't bear the thought of loss. Easier to drift, to never care enough to hurt." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "But you make me want to be brave enough to stay." Clara turned in his arms, studying his face. "Then stay. For tonight? For always, or for as long as always lasts." She touched the scar on his neck, feeling him shiver. "I know you need to wander sometimes. I won't try to cage you, but give me the in-between times. Give me the returns." "And if I want more than the in-between?" Eli asked roughly. "If I want every sunrise, every sunset, every ordinary moment, then take them. Take it all." Clara's voice broke slightly. "I'm so tired of measuring out my life in fear and loss. I want to live, Eli, fully, recklessly, completely, with you." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, a claiming and a promise. When they broke apart, both breathless, he stood and offered her his hand. "Come inside. Clara, come home." She took his hand, let him lead her into the cabin that had been her refuge and her prison. But it felt different now. The shadows had lost their power. The memories of Tom were gentle things, part of the foundation but not the whole structure. That night, as a gentle snow began to fall, Clara and Eli sat by the fire planning their future. Come spring, they'd hire hands to help with the horses. They'd fulfill Tom's army contract. They'd build the ranch into something worthy of multiple dreams, Tom's, Clara's, and now Eli's too. "I want to add on to the house," Clara said suddenly. "More rooms, for whatever comes." Eli's hand tightened on hers, understanding what she couldn't quite say. Rooms for children, for family, for a life that was about more than just survival. "We'll build whatever you want," he promised. "As many rooms as you can fill with laughter." Outside, a wolf howled, a lone voice in the wilderness. But it wasn't answered by a pack. Sometimes, Clara thought, wolves were just wolves, and sometimes people were strong enough to face them. She curled against Eli's side, feeling his heartbeat steady under her palm. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The ranch still needed saving. The community bonds were still fragile, and the territory remained a dangerous place for those who challenged its unwritten rules. But tonight, she had warmth and safety and love. Tonight, she had chosen to live. The fire crackled softly, sending shadows dancing on the walls. But Clara no longer saw threats in those shadows. She saw possibilities, promise, and the flickering outline of all the years to come. Spring arrived with a whisper of warm wind and the first brave wildflowers pushing through the melting snow. Clara stood in her doorway, coffee cup in hand, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. Behind her, she heard Eli stirring, the now familiar sounds of his morning routine, a comfort she'd never thought to have again. "You're up early," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. "Couldn't sleep. Too much to do today." She leaned back against his solid warmth. "The army buyers are coming to look at the horses. If we can fulfill Tom's contract—" "We will," Eli said firmly. "Those horses are the finest in the territory. Captain Morrison knows it." Clara smiled at his confidence. Over the past months, Eli had thrown himself into learning the horse business with the same quiet intensity he brought to everything. The ranch had flourished under their combined care, helped by the neighbors who now regularly stopped by to lend a hand or share a meal. "I need to tell you something." Clara said, turning in his arms. Martha noticed at the barn raising last week. She says I'm carrying... Eli went very still, his eyes searching hers. A child. Our child? Clara watched emotions chase across his face. Joy, fear, wonder. I know we haven't talked about... you said you'd try to stay, but a baby changes... He silenced her with a kiss, gentle but thorough. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. Everything. It changes everything. His hand came to rest reverently on her still flat stomach. Clara, I never thought I'd have this, never thought I deserved it. Do you want it? She asked, suddenly vulnerable. More than I've ever wanted anything, he said fiercely. A child, our child, growing up here, wild and free. He laughed, the sound shaky but joyful. I'll have to build that cradle I've been designing in my head. You've been designing a cradle? Eli flushed slightly. Maybe, been thinking about a lot of things, like making this official. He dropped to one knee right there in the doorway, taking her hand. Clara Whitmore, you've already given me more than I ever dreamed of having. Will you give me the rest too? Will you marry me? Clara's heart overflowed. Yes, of course, yes. He stood and kissed her again, both of them laughing and crying at once. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled cheerfully, and Clara thought she felt Tom's blessing in the warmth of it. He would have wanted this for her. Life, love, future. The sound of approaching horses broke them apart. The army buyers were early. Clara smoothed her dress while Eli quickly shaved and made himself presentable. Together, they walked out to meet Captain Morrison, no relation to the former sheriff, and his men. The captain was impressed with the horses. As Eli had predicted, he tested their gaits, checked their teeth, had his men ride them through their paces. Clara held her breath as he made notes in his ledger. Mrs. Whitmore, he finally said. These animals exceed the contract specifications. The Army will take all 20, and I'm authorized to offer you a continuing contract for 20 more each year, if you can maintain this quality. Clara felt her knees go weak with relief. The payment would more than cover the bank loan, with enough left to hire hands and expand the operation. We can maintain it, Captain, Eli said, shaking the man's hand. You have our word. As the soldiers led the horses away, Clara saw Martha Sullivan's wagon approaching. The older woman climbed down, beaming. Saw the army boys heading this way, she said. Good news, I hope. The best, Clara confirmed. We got the contract. The ranch is saved. That's not the only good news, from the look of you two. Martha's knowing eyes took in their joined hands, the glow on both their faces. Finally made it official, did you? This morning, Eli admitted. We'd be honored if you'd help us spread the word. Small ceremony, nothing fancy, just family and friends. Family, Martha repeated, smiling. Yes, I suppose that's what we've all become. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the meadow behind Clara's cabin, where the wildflowers had exploded in a riot of color. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit and carefully preserved through all her travels. Eli had somehow procured a proper suit, though he tugged at the collar like it was strangling him. Samuel Briggs officiated, having gotten himself ordained by mail order just for the occasion. The entire community turned out, filling the meadow with laughter and music. Even Luke Morrison attended, subdued and walking with a cane from his accident, offering a grudging congratulation that Clara accepted with grace, as they exchanged vows. Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here, the fear, the loss, the nights spent barricaded against human wolves. It had all led to this moment, standing in the spring sunshine with a man who'd chosen to stop drifting for her. I promise to love you in stillness and in wandering, Eli said, his voice carrying across the meadow. To build with you, dream with you, and face whatever storms may come, knowing that together we're stronger than any wind that blows. I promise to be your home and your freedom. Clara replied, her voice clear and strong. To trust in your going and rejoice in your return. to fill our days with laughter and our nights with peace, and to teach our children that love is the greatest courage of all. When Samuel pronounced them married, the cheer that went up could probably be heard in the next territory. The celebration lasted well into the night, with dancing and feasting and toasts that grew increasingly creative as the whiskey flowed. As the evening wound down, Clara and Eli slipped away to the hill overlooking their ranch. Below them, lanterns still glowed in the yard where their friends celebrated. The cabin stood solid and welcoming, expanded now with the extra room Eli had built. In the pasture, the next generation of horses grazed peacefully. "No regrets?" Clara asked, leaning against her husband's side. "Only one," Eli said. "I wish I'd found you sooner. All those years wandering, I was looking for something I couldn't name. Turns out it was you. You found me exactly when you were meant to," Clara said firmly. "Any sooner and I might not have been ready. Any later and I might have given up." A wolf howled in the distance, but the sound held no fear now. It was just part of the wild symphony of their land, no more threatening than the wind in the pines or the creek bubbling over stones. "I love you, Mrs. Boone," Eli murmured against her hair. "And I love you, Mr. Boone," Clara replied, her hand drifting to her growing belly. "All three of us do." They stood together as the moon rose, full and bright, casting silver light over their domain. Tomorrow would bring work, horses to train, fences to mend, a baby's room to finish preparing. There would be challenges too, because the frontier never stopped testing those who called it home. But tonight, Clara felt only gratitude, for the man beside her, for the child growing within her, for the community that had become family, for second chances and the courage to take them, for learning that sometimes the only way to stop running from wolves was to become fierce enough that they ran from you. "Ready to go home?" Eli asked. Clara smiled, taking his offered hand. "I'm already there." They walked back down the hill together, toward the warm lights and the laughter of friends, toward the cabin that had sheltered her grief, and now would cradle her joy. Behind them, the wolf howled again, and this time it was answered by another. But Clara didn't look back. She had found her pack, her place, her purpose. The wild could sing all it wanted. She was no longer afraid of the dark. Inside the cabin, the fire burned bright and steady, ready to warm them through whatever winters might come. And on the mantel, Eli's carved bird spread its wooden wings in endless flight, a reminder that even wild things could choose to stay. The wolves could howl. Clara and Eli had built something stronger than fear, more enduring than wandering, more powerful than all the shadows that had once haunted them. They had built a home. Thank you so much for listening to this story from the Wild West. I hope Clara and Eli's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine to share it. Where are you listening from today? Perhaps by a cozy fire, during your commute, or maybe even somewhere out in the wide frontier. I'd love to hear in the comments below. Please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of courage, love, and survival from the American frontier. And share your thoughts about Clara and Eli's story. Did their love give you hope? Which moment moved you most? Let's gather around our virtual campfire and share these stories that remind us what the human spirit can overcome. Happy trails, partners.